That's why I do this. And especially now, because I think the community has a lot of really good ideas of what we could do as a city to help with COVID-19 situation. And so I wanted to hear what people have to say and what ideas they have and how can we make people's lives easier during this kind of really difficult time. So I guess Annette, what suggestions or ideas do you have?
Oh, well, I'm really glad that the city is going to consider the moratorium on rent. I think that's a very first step that every city has to take. The thing I'm a little bit concerned about is I think that you said that you would want all the rent paid back within 3 or 4 months afterwards. I think to do that will make it almost impossible for any low wage person to actually take advantage. They know that they can't pay it back within 4 months, but I think as Seattle is doing, I think they're saying within the year, or maybe that's Great Britain. I don't know. They're saying that the money would be paid back within a year. That's much more doable. But when you're paying 40% of your income already for rent, you can't pay a second payment that month. So I would really appreciate that. Also, both of my sons are in the restaurant business, and so I would really appreciate. I mean, not down here, but they're, they will go out of business and will not be able to return unless there's some kind of moratorium on business rent too. So that's foremost in my mind right now.
So to the first topic you brought up, which is rent paid back in, have to pay a lump sum back.
Right.
So that's actually a really good point because I think a lot of people, I think I read that the average American only has like $400 extra a month.
I know, isn't it hard to believe? I mean, it's hard to understand, but that is the reality of many of my parents. I used to teach in the public schools, and many of my parents are from Mexico, and they do not have money in the bank. And so we don't want them ending up on the streets, that's for sure.
Definitely not. I mean, I think, unfortunately, this is probably one of the biggest economic disruptions we've seen, maybe in a lifetime. And I think trying to make sure that we don't, that people are able to land on their feet is going to be really important. So, I think it makes sense. Maybe what should happen is they should be able to amortize the rent.
Yes.
Yeah. So rather than having to do a lump sum, you could kind of like work your way towards it, right?
Yes. My father-in-law was an architect, and during the recession, he talked to his landlord, and they deferred the rent and then made a payment schedule for him. So because you won't be able to bill right away, so you have to. But I think it's in the landlord's best interest to keep people, because you're not going to find somebody to take a business over now. And so if they can see that it is really in their best interest to kind of lend a helping hand.
Yeah. So I think some landlords could probably amortize the rent so that it's like it gives some breathing room. I guess the one thing that I'm just thinking about also is I know some landlords also have mortgages, right? And they have to pay the mortgage and the property tax. Especially like small time landlords, right? How do you think what should we do for them in terms of if they're not getting rent, but they have, like, for instance, property taxes are not, I think property taxes are not delayed, unfortunately. I think personal taxes are, but I think property tax, you still have to pay your property tax. Oh yes, you still have to pay.
I heard that they wouldn't have any penalty on that one thing on the property tax, and so you would be able to defer, at least you won't go bankrupt right away by from that. But yeah, I mean, try to be fair to everybody. First of all, though, I think we have to keep people from being evicted onto the streets, and so I think that just takes precedence. And then we do have to. I mean, in a perfect society, all of us would take care of all of us. But right now, we have individuals trying to take care of themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think I read that when people become homeless, it's like this terrible downward spiral, right? So, and so I don't think we want to cause more people to be homeless. That'd be like a really big problem. I'm just trying to think also, like, how to make it so that, because I also know that there's also small town landlords who depend on having having a certain amount of rent coming in order to pay their bills, right? And
Right.
so what I'm worried about is a little bit about the cascading effect of how do we make sure that we don't it doesn't spiral under control, right? Like so like
Well, I
because
think that you do have to end up going to the next step into the banks. You've got to stop, like mortgage foreclosures. There's, unfortunately, this isn't a problem that, a city can handle on its own, or an individual landlord maybe can handle on its own. And we're going to probably see an economic downturn in America. And if it happens like a Great Depression, where you have so many people out of work and people becoming homeless, I think we have to do what we can. And I think as a city council, what you can do is this moratorium on, and you can fight, for better rules from the federal government. When you have bailouts, if you can bail out small people, they'll be able to continue the economy. If you bail out the rich and they buy back their stock, and then that doesn't help us, so.
well, I think the federal government is already contemplating bailouts, like for instance, like the airline industry and like $1 trillion. I think I forgot exactly who they were giving it to, but I know that airlines was one of them because they're definitely going to be hit. And that's something that the cities don't have to worry about the airlines, right? So I think each level of government could probably take care of a certain sector.
Yeah.
But I think what's important is that the whole economy doesn't seize up, because if, for instance, people start getting evicted, that's going to cause a lot of homelessness and other issues, and that causes the economy to seize up. And so we have to kind of make sure that people are covered, so that this doesn't spiral out of control, right?
Yeah. And I think because so many people in Silicon Valley are a couple of steps removed from low wage earners, that maybe they're not thinking about someone who doesn't have any sick days, someone who doesn't have any leave, somebody who doesn't have more than 400. And that's why I just wanted to bring that group of constituents to the forefront.
Yeah. I mean, hi ho.
Hi.
Can you hear us? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm muting.
No problem. But feel free to join in the conversation. We're just, so one of the topics that Annette has brought up is around evictions, right? How to handle evictions. And we were just discussing about how do we kind of prevent some of the more vulnerable people in our society from becoming homeless from this economic I don't know,
crisis,
meltdown. Right? Yeah. It's pretty bad. So yeah, and then we're talking about how to because I know that a lot of mortgages have to be paid and a lot of property taxes have to be paid and other expenses, and so we're just thinking about like the next step, right? Well, so what about those people? And I don't know. I mean, I think for us as a city, one thing that perhaps we could consider is maybe deferring some of the fees, so that whether it's utility fees or registration fees, or because I think in times of crisis, I think it's important for government to step in and help. And so I think the question is, and the city we have a budget stabilization reserve, albeit not that big, but we do have a budget stabilization reserve that we can dip into times of need. And I think now is probably a good time of need. I don't know how long that will last in the current circumstances, because I think our sales tax and our TOT tax, our hotel tax, is suddenly dropping. I've asked staff to kind of calculate that out, because I think that's important to know. But I think the city can act as a buffer, so that if we do this eviction, that perhaps we can stop the next chain of people. Because so there's a tenant, and if they could defer it, then they will impact the mortgage holders, right? If the mortgage holders can get paid, then it impacts the next group of people, right? So it's just like chain reaction that we have to. I think it's the responsibility of government to kind of see how do we mitigate some of this, because otherwise we will have like total disaster, right? So I think that's a really good topic.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we have control over in the city government is utilities. So
Yeah.
first, you don't want to turn off anyone's utilities for
Yeah.
failure to payment. And so I think those two things are definitely important to pass, because some people are bureaucrats and they're going to follow the rule. And so we need to make the rule, no turnoffs or no evictions.
Or the other thing is like parking tickets, right? Should we be like giving out parking tickets right now, right?
Who's parking now?
Who's parking now? Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw, but on consent calendar for tomorrow, this city is looking to spend $2.3 million on parking enforcement. So, that's consent item number 2. So the question is this the right time to be spending $2.3 million on parking enforcement, or should we be using that $2.3 million to maybe give relief on utilities, or relief on property taxes, or relief on some other fee that we have control over? Sorry, I think Clive, you just joined.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for joining. So there's Annette, myself, Hal, Din, and yourself on the call. So feel free to jump in. We were just talking. We started a conversation about talking about evictions, and trying to defer some of the evictions, as well as how do we figure out if the evictions are deferred, how do we help some of the mortgage holders who will be impacted by that. And Annette also talked a little bit about the impact to some of the restaurants and I assume restaurant workers as well, and how do we help that. But this is just a topic for us to discuss issues related to COVID-19 and what we can do as a city to help the people impacted by this. So so these are some topics that Annette has brought up, but if either of you guys have, either Hal or Clive, if you guys have other suggestions or thoughts, please let me know.
So I have a question. So that's why I'm speaking. So do you represent Mountain View?
No, I don't, unfortunately. I only represent Palo Alto. So I'm on the Palo Alto.
Yeah. So maybe a thought, but you were mentioning parking enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a big topic here anyway, but I was thinking that enforcing we're in a time where we're trying to encourage people not to move around.
Yeah.
And I feel like, having the party ticket still running, it's kind of encouraging people to take their car to move, to move them somewhere else or things like that. So anyway, just a thought.
I see. So you're saying that we should continue to do parking enforcement?
Oh, and I'm saying that maybe we should not, because maybe from my personal experience, having parking enforcement forced people to move the car around.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I think I've gotten a lot of emails on that. A lot of people say that we should not do parking enforcement.
Yeah.
First of all, because people are under severe economic duress right now, but also for the issue that you talked about, and also like there's not as big of a parking issue right now because like people aren't going outside the house a whole lot. So so that's another reason. So that's yeah, and also like the other reason that we brought up during this discussion is like we're looking at spending $2.3 million on parking enforcement or proving that tomorrow, but like maybe we should use that to help because if people are going to be delaying paying their utility bills, the city needs a buffer. Maybe we can use some of those millions of dollars that we were spent on parking enforcement to give people some relief on some of the utility bills they have to pay, right? Or some of the other fees, the city fees that they have to pay, right?
I think that's a great idea. And, we're supposed to be a compassionate, intelligent, smart sort of city. And spending that kind of money on, going around and giving people parking tickets, to me, just seems, really crazy. Now, if people are blocking, driveways that are for, that are important for egress and ingress for, ambulances and fire engines and things like that, then we should go ahead and tow those people or, ticket them. But if it's just somebody parking downtown for more than an hour, and then now we're going to enforce a parking ticket on them. That to me seems not in the spirit of what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And I think, there's a lot of people that have lost their jobs that have to pay rent and or pay their mortgage or pay their, utility bill. And, what the city could do is they could say, look, we're going to look at a means tested kind of strategy of helping citizens of the city out. And, you come and prove to us that you need help. We're going to use all means we can to help people. This is going to be a 3-month thing, hopefully. And it's not like it's forever. And if you take $2.5 million or whatever it is over 3 months, that's a few $100,000 a month, a significant amount of money. And that could really help quite a few people in the city.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that the interesting thing is that there hasn't been a lot of people who, I guess, people are busy right now, but a lot of people haven't written on this consent item. It's a consent item to spend this money on parking enforcement, which I would think a lot of people would have wrote in about it. But I think people are busy, so they probably haven't noticed it.
I'm really glad you brought it up, and you could intend. I think what's going to happen is we're going to need some kind of family emergency assistance because people are not going to have money. A lot of the food banks probably are not servicing people now because they relied on people my age to be the people handing out the food. And so I've had 2 families come recently who have run out of food, and I give them money and then I send them to the food bank. But now I don't know where they're going to go. And I think that if we have an emergency fund for people that are need-based, that would be great. But also if there's some, I don't know if there's anybody in the city that can do it, but we need to find out easily where the services are for people who have run out of money. So I don't know how we're going to do that, but it has to be easier than everybody doing it themselves.
Yeah, and I think one role of government is to be that area of last resort, because we have the ability to borrow money, or on the federal level, we have the ability to actually print money, right? So, I do think that it's an important topic, right? And also, like, maybe the city should look at reallocating some of the money. So one of the other items on consent is the city budget, right? So right now the city is planning to copy and paste what we did in 2020 to the same thing as 2021. But the big problem with that is that, of course, a lot of the 2020 revenue is really not going to happen, right? Our hotel taxes collapsed, our sales taxes collapsed. So we're not going to have the money that we thought we had. And then also, should we still be spending money the way we were planning to spend it? Or should we start putting some money into like these, family emergency assistance programs, or mortgage deferrals, or utility deferrals, so that we help. You can spend money on park enforcement like we were going to, or we can move money towards things where it helps the people really impacted by this, by COVID-19, right? The economic impact. So, but it was really interesting. We have these 2 very significant items on the calendar as consent items, but nobody's written in about them. And I think maybe people haven't even read about it, but it's really, it's something that, to me, it looks like, given the changes that have been going on, we need to reprioritize some of the city's resources for things that actually help the impacted members of our community. So yeah, I'm with you guys on that. And Clive, I agree with you in terms of, like, I think there still needs to be, like, people blocking the driveway or blocking a fire hydrant or something like that. We still need to do towing and stuff like that. But whether we need to ticket someone for over parking for 5 minutes on Cal Ave, I don't know, right? That to me seems like
the other thing that I would say is that part of the strategy of the city council in general should be one of the things that they could look at is this counter-cyclical sort of strategy for essentially when times are good and you've got lots of revenue from taxes and things like that, you build a slush fund. And then when times are bad and we go into a recession and you're going to lay people off, you then use that money to keep them employed and do city projects and other kinds of things like that. So, I would certainly like to see the council, implementing a counter-cyclical kind of strategy, because then people stay employed in the bad times, and it's relatively easy to put money away when times are good, right? Because you have a surplus of revenue.
Yeah, I think to me that's like sound economic policy, right? So like, and that's why I think copying pasting the 2020 budget for 2021 makes no sense. I mean, for 2021, we should probably plan to lose money. We have reserves. We should probably start, and also we should reallocate the money from things like parking enforcement to things that people need, right? Like food and utilities deferral and stuff that people really need. So during the good times, which has just ended a few weeks ago, we didn't really build up our BSR that much. We kind of kept it where it was. We didn't, any excess money, we kind of spent it. But anyways, it is what it is right now. But now is probably the time for us to actually look at probably drawing on that budget stabilization reserve and other reserves to kind of keep the economy going until it gets restarted. And then when it gets restarted, then we could draw back on that and then start building up reserves again when economies are good, when economy is good. And I think that's sound policy. And that's why, to me, item 5A on the consent calendar, which is to cut and paste our budget from last year, makes no sense to me, because now the economy has flipped over, like from like booming times to like really people are talking about this as being the Great Recession, or perhaps even a depression. And so we should be, the budget should be vastly different from what it was. It shouldn't be just doing the same thing as we did before and everything's good. We should be making some pretty drastic changes to make sure that our community members are taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, the vast
So
majority of people in Palo Alto are wealthy, are affluent, but we do have a community in Palo Alto. There are some areas where they're not as affluent, and I think most of the people that can afford it would support the city in doing this right thing, right? It's the right humanitarian thing to do.
Greg, is the city council going to be live streamed?
It's going to be, so I've been working with staff. I was trying to get them to do it last Monday, but they couldn't get it on the time. But they're going to be, this time they're going to be doing a Zoom like this, which is great. Unfortunately, the public can't call into it yet. Maybe the meeting after they could do it. I'm still pushing for that. But they are going to do a YouTube live stream, which I've been pushing for that. So you're about to get the YouTube live stream. We can't quite get people to participate like this on Zoom. Although I'm hoping that maybe not tomorrow we could do it, but next Monday we could do it.
Yeah. We have to change. And decisions that are made tonight will be different tomorrow. This is a very fast changing kind of crisis.
Yeah.
Do you have any understanding about whether the city can direct banks to make it easier for people with mortgages?
I don't actually know. I have a feeling that if it's like outside of our jurisdiction, like if it's like Bank of America, which is nationwide, or global bank, probably not. I think we could probably do something within our boundaries of our city. So I think, but I think there are things we do have control over, like parking fees. We could control that. We could control like utility fees. Like utilities, like my utilities is like $500-600 a month. I mean, it's not an insignificant amount of money per month. I know that.
The mortgage thing is a good point. So are banks going to repossess the home if there are payment misses, or?
So that's another that's the topic we actually started with, which is, so there's we have on the table right now renter evictions, right? But the problem is, of course, if renters don't pay their rent, then the people that hold the mortgages are going to get the property repossessed, right? And so it kind of spirals, right? So the renters don't pay, then the mortgage holders get into trouble, right? And then they lose their property. So it's kind of like a spiraling effect. And I think right now, one of the important things for government to do is to prevent this chain reaction from happening, because otherwise everyone in the economy gets the whole economy seizes up. So we need to make sure that people are taken care of, like in the whole chain. Otherwise we're gonna have some serious problems. But I don't know the full jurisdiction control that we have.
I do know that during the last recession, when people had to renegotiate their mortgages, it was a battle. I mean, like hours and hours and hours on the phone to help people to do that.
Yeah.
And if there were, from the government, if there was some directive that, okay, this is not for the rest of your life, but this is for a few months or however long this goes, we're going to have to make it easier to do that. And
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it, but that's what I think we have to do, because you can't leave the poorest people who have the hardest time reading all that mumbo jumbo to renegotiate. They'll be out on the streets too.
Well, I think even recent homeowners, right? People who just bought their house recently, their mortgage bills are gonna be really, really high. And
Yeah.
I can imagine even for them who are relatively well off in terms of by US standards, are living paycheck to paycheck, right? I mean, some of the mortgage and property tax can be, 2/3 or more of someone's paycheck. And people even at large companies like Tesla is not making cars anymore, right? So what is Tesla going to do? Just keep losing money? I mean, to raise money right now is really, really hard. Like for companies that are losing money, it's really hard for them to raise money. So even people in relatively good paying jobs are going to, I mean, I don't think there's anyone that's immune right now to this economic crisis.
Yeah.
I think, and I think people who, maybe have a, 2 engineering salary type of family, they may have a mortgage that consumes most of their paycheck. And if just one of them loses their jobs, they're in trouble. So I think this impact is something that's going to be pervasive in our community. I don't think it's just going to be, the people on the low end. I think a lot of people are going to be affected.
So I have a very different question. So you keep talking about copy pasting the budget of 2020 to 2021.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any budget reallocation for 2020?
Well, I think there should be, right? And so, for me, I was a little bit surprised to see that such a major decision to cut and paste the budget from 2020 to 2021 was on a consent calendar. I would expected this to be an action item so the members of the committee could actually speak about it and give their thoughts. Maybe they would say, well, instead of spending all this money on park enforcement like we did in 2020, maybe we should use that money to help with, renter assistance or mortgage assistance or something, or maybe deferring some of the utilities. To me, that would have been a more proper thing to do versus just saying, we're gonna spend this money the same way we're gonna spend it before, and we're gonna get the same kind of revenue that we got before. Because, I mean, we all know sales taxes just plummeted. We all know that hotel taxes has plummeted. So that's money we're not gonna be getting, right? So how do we plan for that? So there's some things we know right now, and we'll know more. Maybe in 2 weeks, this all turns around that, the prices stopped and everything comes booming back. I hope that's what happens.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think so
Greg,
either.
what can we do as far as right now trying to get those things off the consent calendar?
Well, I think most stuff on consent calendar are supposed to be non-controversial items, and I think item 2 and item 5A are incredibly controversial. I mean, to say that we're going to spend $2.3 million in this economic situation on park enforcement, to me, it doesn't seem like the humane thing to be doing. To be saying that we're going to use the same budget we did in 2020 for 2021, and yes, we'll amend it later, doesn't seem like the right thing to be doing. We should be taking some drastic action right now.
Well, we've got this massive revenue shortfall. I don't know what percentage it is of the overall budget, but if big sources of income are basically that those hotel taxes and sales taxes, they're going to, it's going to be August before this thing flushes through, right? It's probably half a year of impact to the budget.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at least that, right? And I mean, and that's if we do everything right and get all the stimulus packages right, and we don't get the economy to seize up. So I think you're right, and that's why I think we need to, as government, right? And I think government is kind of like the last resort. And right now, this is a time of crisis. I think it's important for government at all levels to step in. I know at the federal level, they're looking at a $1 trillion stimulus package, right? And I know at the state level, they're starting to look at things, but on local level, we should do it as well to try to make sure that community is going to be taken care of as best as we can. Now we don't have the capacity that the federal government has of printing money or doing quantitative easing or something like that. But we can do small things like, well, let's move the $2.3 million of parking enforcement towards maybe utility payment deferrals or something like that, right? We can do some things in a small way that would help as well.
And you've got to model what this loss is going to look like, right? If we have a loss of revenue, we have to tighten the belt in non-essential items. This is just best practices, right?
I agree. And so I've asked staff at the last council meeting to estimate. So we have a budget stabilization reserve. And because we have big chunks of revenue missing now, we need to estimate what is that, how long is a budget stabilization reserve going to last, given the burn rate, the amount of money that we're not getting, right? It's going to be eaten into this budget stabilization reserve. So we could kind of see where that is. The other thing I talked about at the last meeting was perhaps doing a bond offering, because the city really has good credit, and it's questionable how easy it is for us to raise money right now as a city, but we have really, really good credit rating. So can we do a bond offering that would help, that will give us a bigger reserve that allows us to provide a bigger buffer to the community? Because I know on an individual basis, it's really hard for individuals to get a loan right now. But for the city, we have taxing authority and we have better credit rating, and we have more capacity to borrow than individual business or individual community residents. So that's the other thing I think we should start looking at. And muni bonds are usually perceived as being fairly safe in general because municipals have taxing authority. So I'm thinking we should be taking steps now, active steps now, to prevent bigger economic issues that are going to be happening unless we take action.
Yeah, and it would be the right time because everyone is trying to relocate their savings into different things. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know people already who've gone laid off. I know people even people at supposedly stable companies like Google that are like concerned. Because one of my friends at Google is not in a core part of Google, so he's thinking, oh my God, is Google going to cut us, right? So even the perceived tech titans, right, are people there are worried. So if those people are worried, you got to imagine about everyone else, right? How's everyone else going to make it, right? And so I think it's important for us to help the community as best we can.
So maybe something else. I mean, kind of unrelated, but so I personally live in Mountain View, so not really in Palo Alto. And I'm wondering if the city, so a couple of cities of Santa Clara are sharing ideas about how to overcome that at that time.
Yeah, so I've been talking to council members from other cities like Mountain View, Menlo Park, other cities around the nation, just about what they're doing, because we're not the only city suffering from this. I think we are blessed to have perhaps more than most other cities, but even our city is not immune to this. And so I've been talking about like even simple things like, okay, how do we do council meetings remotely? Well, Zoom, right? Or how do we help our community, right? So maybe like let's do some deferrals or some leniency on some of the utility fees, right? Or maybe not so aggressively do the parking enforcement right now, right? So I mean, so I'm talking with other cities to see how we get best ideas, because this is a unprecedented event, and I think it's going to take the best ideas, and that's why I'm holding this. And I'm going to do it probably almost every week, but this is why I'm holding this session, is because I'm looking for ideas from the community on what we could do that would help the community through this situation. And so yeah, I mean, I'm looking for ideas because I don't think we have a lock on it. I think the most creative ideas are going to be needed because it's such a big problem right now.
Once you come up with some ideas, make sure it's a really widely disseminated and easy to read language and very few steps needed to activate whatever the help is.
Yeah.
You might want to ask Lisa if she has something.
Lisa, do you have any comments or questions or thoughts on what do we do as a city? I don't know if Lisa, you're on mute, but we can't hear you. Okay, I don't know. I think maybe her microphone or I don't know, speaker not working, but yeah. But I mean, to me, one of the most straightforward things we should do is looking at moving money from things that are important, but maybe not as essential, to things that are critical, right? Because that's something we can do. And I think it's our responsibility as a city to do this for our community.
So the $2.3 million for parking enforcement, is that just for salaries for the parking enforcement people?
So this is the other thing for me. It's like it's going towards a third-party company.
Oh, then definitely.
So to me,
We're not even responsible for
Oh
those
my
people.
God.
yeah.
Okay, I really recommend that whenever you need some help on the council, that somehow you get out a little message to people who have talked with you in the past
Yeah.
with
Well,
your ideas and how to contact the council, because I think that you can't be the only voice, advocating.
yeah, absolutely. And so like if you guys, you guys could look at the agenda and make a decision yourself whether whether spending $2.3 million on parking enforcement right now is right thing to do or not. I personally think we should use the money for utility deferral, because that's something that I know could definitely help people.
Right.
And some
Absolutely.
kind of emergency funding.
Yeah.
I mean,
Emergency funding, yeah.
And there's probably some hard decision to make. I mean, that's going to happen. So
Yeah. So I think, and then like to me, the copy and pasting the budget to me is really weird. I that should not be consent item. That's something which I think for us as council members, we need to help prioritize what's important in the city. So I think this should be an action item that we talk about and we vigorously debate what's important, because there's a lot of hard choices, a lot of things that we'd like to do, but right now the amount of money coming in is a lot less, and needs have changed, right? And so we
Yes.
need to figure out how do we prioritize stuff, and these are difficult conversations, but I think we have to have them. And I think it's gonna be hard for staff to be able to do that without having that kind of political discussion, that rigorous political discussion about what are the values of the community and what do we trade off to kind of tide things through, at least for the next month or so or longer, right? Because I don't know how long this is going to last.
So maybe I have a small question. I'm circling back to mortgage and so I mean repossession and foreclosure, all those things. Is there does it have any big consequence to like just prevent those things? The bad consequences at the end from happening. I mean repossession and foreclosure.
You mean on mortgages?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. Because the economy is like it's like a gigantic pipeline, right? So one person pays another person,
Sure.
it's like a chain reaction. One person pays one person, that person pays another person, so it keeps on going, right? So, like we were talking about earlier, if the people paying rent don't pay the people who hold the mortgages, the people who hold the mortgages are going to be in hot water really soon, right? Or even people who like live in a house and have a mortgage, if they can't pay the mortgage, I mean, we're going to talk about evictions of people who don't, who maybe aren't renters, but they can't afford the mortgage, or serious damage to their credit score, right? So there's all this other kind of stuff that happens to people who can't pay the mortgage, right? And so what can the city do to help mitigate some of this? Now, the problem is I don't think we have an emergency fund to that size that can really kind of alleviate all this, but maybe this is why we need to think about reprioritizing some of the city resources on things
But are the banks going to be impacted by not getting their mortgage in time? I mean, that's more around my question. Is that?
Yeah, I think it would be, yeah. So that's why it's not so simple. You could say, well, look, let's just make it so that people don't have to pay the rent and don't have to pay the mortgage. Okay, well then you look at the next people in line. That's the banks. The banks will get into serious trouble because they have to pay interest and other stuff to other people, right? Or people want to withdraw money from the bank, and if you don't have people paying the mortgage or the rent, right? Or I guess paying the mortgage, then they're impacted, right? And then you start seeing bank failures, right? And then bank failures means that other people are affected, right? So this is a cascading effect that kind of ripple throughout the whole economy if we don't think about this kind of in a rational way to make sure that the economy doesn't seize up. Because that's my biggest fear right now, is that the economy is going to start seizing up. I mean, we're having this kind of, shelter in place situation that's causing a certain part of the economy to seize up, and it's going to trickle. It's not going to trickle. It's going to like be a tsunami throughout the rest of the economy unless we start making steps so that it doesn't this problem doesn't cascade throughout the whole economy.
But Greg, I think when you think about what you have control over, I think only thing you have control over is a moratorium on evictions at the local level. And I think that's where you're going to have to put, I know that there's very big things to think about.
Yeah.
That is the very most important thing, is that people are not out on the street, because COVID virus would then spread. It would just,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's something worse than pandemic, but it would be something worse.
Well,
So
we don't want to be Italy, right? We don't want to be like what happened in Italy. So I think we want to be able to contain this. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's like, what can we control? We control evictions. We can control utility payments. We could control parking permits or parking fees. We can control, like, we have certain things within our control, and we should look at that and figure out the priorities of those.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I will write to the city council right now, and I recommend anybody else that you talk to that. Okay, thanks a lot very much, Greg.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we're just about out of time, but I don't know, Lisa or anyone else have any other questions or thoughts before we end this?
No, I think you raised some very good points, and I think scrapping this parking stuff is absolutely, it's right on the money, right?
To me, it seems like it, right? I mean, in terms of priority, we have bigger fish to fry.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.